Yeah, it should be at the top of your email.
I'll follow.
Good evening. I will call the Smithville R2 Board of Education meeting to order. Please stand and offer the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is vendor.
Well, I'd like to introduce
Tonight, this is Officer Chris Mendoza. He is the new school resource officer, the second, I shouldn't say new, but he's newly hired as our second school resource officer for the district.
We
Just,
he just interviewed what has been 2 weeks ago
last week now, and
he's
not
not
a
3
stranger
years to Smithville. Matter of fact, he's a regular around town. He's been here for
a
quite a
while, and he will be joining Officer Buckeye as a part of our school safety staff. So he will be housed out at Eagle Heights Elementary. This is Eagle Heights
north of town, and he'll be working.
primarily with our elementary schools, but Officer Buckeye works with our secondary schools, but of course, both officers will be available at all buildings. all the time. So we want to welcome you to the Warrior family. Thank you for coming tonight, and board, if you have any questions.
He's here to entertain.
No questions, comments.
What you and our community and the safety piece. We really appreciate both of you.
Thank you for the time. Where's that?
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
All right, Officer Mendoza just
12-hour shift, I believe is what I heard. And so we got him a little earlier in the agenda.
agenda so he can get some rest now. So thank you for coming in early.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, 7.1, adoption or modification of the agenda. Does anyone have any adoptions or modifications of the agenda? If not, I would accept a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All right, 7-0, motion passes. Next item on the agenda, 8.1, approval, or 8.0, approval of the consent agenda, which includes regular session minutes for November 16th, the joint city board meetings from November 1st, workshop meeting minutes from November 1st, supplemental pay for November, approval of bill payments for December, and federal impact aid grant application. If there are no questions on this, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So with this being in consent, I would have to abstain from the entire consent agenda. So once again, I go back to why we did the meeting minutes separate, just for this reason, and apologize for not catching it before now.
Point taken, and we'll take that going forward.
Yeah, second.
All right, if there's no further discussion, please vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 601 with Mr. Fail abstaining. Next item on the agenda, 9.0 communications. Do we have any comments from the audience? All right, 9.2 board priorities update.
Well, this month we have 3 priorities we're going to discuss. The first is to monitor all aspects of the performance and continuous improvement standards related to MSIP 6. And also number 2, facilitate the development and implementation of the 2023 through 2028 strategic plan. Both of these items, Dr. Cratfield will update the board during her section. And lastly, execute effective search and hiring process for the next superintendent of schools. And Mr. Wonder, you probably have an update you would like to provide at this time.
I do indeed. Thank you, Mrs. Harwood. First and foremost, I want to take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Harwood for her leadership and her steady hand during this extremely important time. And this board is unanimous in our thank you to that leadership and the work that you've done for the district the past several months. And we look forward to your continued leadership and continued steady hand in the district for years to come. We also want to thank everyone in the community. We had a very open and a rather collaborative search process. We had over 500 unique touch points from community members on what we wanted from our next superintendent, what we needed, and many of them participating actually in the interview process and providing feedback. With that, we had 4 stellar candidates as finalists in the end. One did stand out and is the right leader to lead our district into a new phase. And we're pleased to have Dr. Mark Moss actually with us this evening, who will start on July 1st. Dr. Moss is here and will begin a formal transition as part of our contract with our search firm. They're helping with a formal transition plan. And so we'll have that put in place. And so you'll see that kind of roll out over a period of time. But we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Moss home. And once a warrior, always a warrior. So welcome. Next item on the agenda, 9.3, Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services.
I just have a few. Well, thank you, Randy. Unmuted me. Just a few items for the board. We have just recently received all of the assessment data that I used to create the assessment executive summary. So I would like to suggest that we have that meeting in February. We already have a program evaluation meeting set. The last program evaluation, I think, was very unique in that we had several things that ended up taking much more time than we anticipated. So for future years, we will separate those so we don't have that again. I don't think that we would have the same situation for the February program evaluations. And so I'm suggesting that maybe we combine those 2 things, if that's okay with you. Very well then. I'll get that prepared and we will just add that to that particular date. Also in early second semester, we typically have an evening where we recognize students. And so I was wondering if you would like to set a date for that. We typically do that at the end of January. And I can check the activities schedule.
In the back.
Yes, and during COVID, we actually separated the buildings. So we honored one building at a time. They each had about 30 minutes. That worked really well. It keeps the numbers down. It makes the night a little bit longer for you, but I think it's more efficient, a little more personal for the buildings. And so I would recommend that we keep that structure if that's okay. All righty then. Does anyone want to suggest a date? And I can check the school calendar to see if there are any conflicts.
Can we do before the 27th? That week sometime? I don't, if you
Before?
said the end of January, is that what you said? Or-
Typically, we do the end of January.
We can do any time after that. I just probably won't be able to.
Okay, let's see. On Wednesday, the 25th, it looks like basketball is away. So that would,
You have a Maple Elementary movie night that night.
okay, we don't want to do that. That's not on this calendar, so I appreciate you providing that information. On the 24th, Tuesday, the 24th, we have an away basketball game.
You have the Maple Elementary movie night for the younger kids.
Okay, what about Monday, the 23rd?
What's Maple doing that night?
Why did you put that on the calendar?
Looks like Maple is free that night.
Thank you, Maple.
Well, it's about honoring kids, so we
Yes,
certainly don't want to
absolutely
put it on a day where an entire building may be out for the count.
What time does it start, Michelle?
We usually start at 6 and then do a half an hour with a 10-minute break to transition folks out and in. And we have a little bit of a rotation that I would need to look at so that we don't always have the same school going early and the same school going late.
So I think even with it being a movie night, if we were in a later rotation, it would work.
The 23rd also, there wouldn't be, the basketball games are away, so there wouldn't be a lot of congestion. What about Monday, the 23rd?
That works for me.
All right, let's put it on Monday, the 23rd then. And I'll get a schedule out to everybody. And we'll also begin soliciting recommendations from the teachers. I'm sorry?
That's the tournament week for middle school. Those, they will be away, but as long as we're later in the evening, I think we'll be okay.
I usually do the elementaries first and then middle school and high school, so we can, in fact, we can have you guys go last if you want. To ensure, would that be?
I think if we're just in that second group.
Okay. Very good. All right, I actually had anticipated that by tonight I'd be able to give you some APR information, and we have nothing yet. It's supposed to come time in December, but they haven't even announced the date. I checked the memo list again today, so I have nothing there. As far as MSIP goes, we were wrapping up all of the response to standards, the reformatting of the CSIP, all of that will be completed and submitted tomorrow morning. We also have to submit the results of the survey questions that we're required to include. We have all of that, so that will all be taken care of that. So I'm very excited to have that part completed, and then the rest really is just based upon our academic performance from this year, as well as our attendance and the things that we have been judged by in the past few years as well. So I'm excited to see how this all turns out and the feedback that we get so that we can improve as we move forward. As far as strategic planning goes, you have before you a draft of our portrait of a graduate. We took all of the responses from the groups who participated in the think tank, those two mornings in November, categorized them, and there was a small group. Whitney was in that group, as well as Tracy. We had a student, Lily Medley, a community member, Alicia Nath was there, and Carol Noger also participated. So we categorized and came up with these 2-word labels for 5 different categories of attributes that we would expect our graduates to have. And then the verbiage that is included there is completely based upon the words that the participants provided. And so we used as many of those as we could to capture the sentiment of our community who worked on this. It is not the same as other portrait of a graduate, and that's fine. We're not the same as other districts, and I feel like we were very faithful to the input of the people who participated in our think tank, and have been wordsmithing for the last week or so, and I think I like this. I have sent it out to the group who participated in the creation of it to get additional feedback, but I think this is probably what it will be. So if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. You can share it now, or you can send it to me via email. The next step in the process will be actually early January, and I'll send an invite out to this. There's another group that had volunteered to participate in establishing the strategic goals. That will be facilitated by Future IQ and will be a Zoom meeting. It'll be an early morning meeting so that hopefully all of the staff who have volunteered, because there were quite a few staff members in this particular group, will be able to participate. And then that will establish the broad categories, the broad goals that we're attempting to achieve with our next strategic plan. And then in February, there will be focus groups who will work on the action steps related to that. The dates are February 13th and 14th. Bad timing, I know, with Valentine's Day, but David really wanted it prior to a board meeting so that he would be able to come to the board meeting and share. So he's planning to be here on February 15th. We will also expect him on January 18th. He is working with Flint Hills, a group in Flint Hills, and so he will be here in the area and would like to come and just spend a little bit of time with you and share the progress so far. And all of the information has been collected through the survey, which will close on Friday. Until Friday. We have 360 responses, and things haven't changed really since the think tank. So we're still getting really consistent feedback from those who are participating. But yes, we'll leave it open until Friday and then close it. We figure if we haven't got responses, then we won't. But that is all that I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Dr. Crowderfield?
I like it.
Thank you very much. 9.4, Executive Director of Support Services.
Thanks, Mr. Blumford. I have several topics to talk about tonight, but most of those topics are an agenda item later in the session. So I really have one that doesn't relate to that. And so that comes from Clay County. Clay County is currently the county we get about 80% of our local revenue from. And you might have seen they had some distribution issues sending out their tax bills. And so they have given an extension to all of the residents to January 15th instead of the typical December 31st. And so being that 60% of our local revenue, approximately 60% comes from local revenue, that means we'll see that money come in later after one of our payroll dates that we have for our district. So again, another reason why our district has reserve ratios and has a board policy based on that. So our reserve ratios are based on about 3 months of reserves for the number of expenses we have for our district. So just want to let you know that Clay County had put that publication out that they had sent that to the residents. So we'll see our local dollars from Clay County just a little bit later than in typical yearly cycles than we've seen in the past. So just want to let everybody know about that. And then the other items, again, are addressed in some sort of agenda item that we have later on. So we don't have duplication. I'll wait and talk about those then.
Wayne's never that short.
Well, with that, 10.1, General Financial Review.
Yes. In your general financial review, one of the things I wanted to mention is there is a document new to that area that basically gives a budget update for the month. And what that gives is a running total of where we started with our preliminary budget and larger items that have hit the budget since that time. So for example, you can see at the top, when I presented the preliminary budget, we were a negative 394,000. Since that time, we have seen a higher increase in assessed valuation than we anticipated. Probably, I would say residents of most counties were higher than they anticipated as well. The state imposed a pandemic provision for attendance. Typically, our WADA is based on current year or the highest of the previous 2. They allow us to do the previous 3. And matter of fact, that previous 3, that last one is the highest year we've had in the last 4. So that gave us a higher state payment, some staffing changes in the positive direction, meaning that there were some positions that we did not hire. And so we saw less expenses, thus that amount of positive to our budget. You have the land purchase that we had this fall, and then the transportation contract update and the addition to our SRO. So as different things, major items hit the budget as we go forward, I'll continue to add this document. You can kind of see what we have as a running total.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Any additional questions for Mr. Hedgeworth on the financial review? All right, 10.2, update on enrollment.
As you can see the report in your board packet, we have increased by 2 students in the last month. But I'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions on this one?
Two from the last month that we're down actually 15 from the official or the
Correct.
September meeting, right?
We have.
Hearing no additional questions, we'll move on to 10.3, resolution for the April 2023 bond election.
Yes, thank you. In your packet, you have the resolution for the bond language, and I wanted to go through that real quick. You can see the language. There were many discussions that we had for our draft in our last meeting, and kind of wanted to go through what you're seeing with that. And so we talked about having different versions for you to look at. I talked to Hayden Crumpton from Gilmore Bell, and the first one I wanted to mention was that last question that basically talks about the debt service property tax levy being unchanged, and if we can move that to the top. We certainly can. In the past, he looked at our old language ballots. We have always kept at the bottom for our school district. And he would say best practices would be to leave that as the last statement. We don't have to. That was his recommendation. And so if that's something you would like to change, we can certainly move that to the top. But for a historical perspective, we've never had that at the top for any of our own ballot language for our own district, just FYI. And then I talked about some of the projects, and I mentioned to him that there might want to be some wordsmithings or some slight changes to some of the project descriptions. And he said, you know, not knowing exactly what that might be, instead of having a bunch of different versions, present as is. And then if there's anything you'd like to change, basically it would be put in the motion that you make a motion to accept the draft language with the change of, and then state that change. We put it in the meeting notes. And then that way, when we sent the meeting notes back to Gilmore Bell to officially put out the paperwork to the county, to the election boards, that would be in there and be changed. So you would want to state that and how you want to approve that ballot language to make any changes that you might want. So be happy to answer any questions that you might have in the ballot language. Just so you know, the ballot language as it stands right now was the exact same as it was last month. So any of those concerns that you would have last month, we want to discuss and make sure we vet out in today's meeting.
I only have one small thing, but in the installing safety and security upgrades, because you've mentioned middle school, Horizon, specifically high school, I almost wonder if you actually do list each school so that the community can see we are adding security at every single one of our buildings, and it will impact every single child in the school district. I know it might be wordy or add more, but when people can connect that this is gonna make a difference in my child's school, in our neighborhood school.
Do you think district wide would?
I think you're going really personal when you actually list the individual schools. That was my only contribution to that. It makes it personal, which is what it is. It's safety for their children, so.
I saw the forms with synthetic turf, but I believe I'm 1 of 7 after talking to people, so.
I say put that out to the voters, and let them decide, but I'm still not convinced we need synthetic turf. And I do think that's going to be a sticking point to the public on this bond issue.
I have no objections to spelling out the individual schools.
Just trying to think how you would phrase that.
Would you say installing safety and security upgrades to all buildings instead of listing the individual schools, or would you want the individual schools listed?
I just think listing them.
Because it's ultimately every building, right?
It is every building,
Touches
including
every
central
building.
office.
So did you say district facilities including and list the schools where students are at, so parents see that?
Installing safety and security upgrades at high school, middle school, and then each elementary is just how I would do it. I mean,
Yeah, I think we'd want to, do you want, I mean, because do you want to list out the WAC and the central office and, right?
no, I wouldn't separate the.
But
WAC from the
they're
high
part
school.
of it, right? So we're gonna have to say all district facilities, including. And then list the schools, because
Okay,
we can't. If we just list those schools and leave other folks out, then we're limiting where those funds can go, right?
gotcha.
Yeah, we don't want to limit where the funds can go.
I think
Security.
I hear what you're saying about it making it personal. I just
Yeah.
wanted to be too worried as voters are reading it, and you guys, what's your feedback on that? If not, that's fine. Was it all district facilities?
I just feel, because there are going to be people that are concerned with certain issues, so if they can connect with one or two of those, then hopefully they'll be on board, I guess.
You could say including but not limited to Smithville Elementary, Verizon Elementary, Eagle Elementary. All districts are still including, but not limited to.
Yeah, I like that. I know it might seem like a small thing, but
So I'm trying to help you out here. So is the motion to approve the language as presented with the following edit? That security upgrades at all district facilities, including but not limited to Eagle Heights, Verizon, Maple, middle school, and high school.
yes,
We would need to include central office and Ware Activity Center.
That's the all district facilities,
but not limited
but not
to.
limited
Yeah.
to.
Okay.
I like that.
Because if we list all those out, that
Sure.
gets really lengthy,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
Sure.
So is that your motion?
Yes, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Did you get
Thanks,
that, or-
Any discussion? Someone need in?
That door gets jammed.
I like it.
It's not my son.
Hearing no further discussion unless this individual has something to say, please vote.
All district facilities, including either.
And
School and high school. Does this need the same?
Oh, the original motion.
Did you put that again?
I just made a note for myself.
Okay.
and I'm showing that you had the motion, right?
Yes. Yes. Did I? I didn't talk.
No, it was.
Karen, something- something's recorded
Made
incorrectly.
motion,
That's
and
weird.
Ian second.
Yeah, when it is.
Oh, sorry.
Whitney and Ian.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Because it's like that, it'll be okay.
And then it not as presented, right?
Correct, adding the verbiage.
Okay.
That we discussed.
Okay, because as it reads now, it says as presented, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to put that in the minutes and make sure.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Nomination.
There are no further discussion, please vote. 7-0, motion carries. Thank you all very much. 10.4, instructional assistant and substitute recommendations.
This was carried on over, from last month. I'm gonna ask Kim Davis to speak to this, and then I may add some comments at the end, so please go ahead.
So this is a conversation we've been having over the last couple of months. We've been evaluating these two critical areas that really help make the success of the school happen. Our buildings are not successful without instructional assistants. They're critical for our special education program. They're critical for behavior management in the classroom. They hit so many areas and they really support our teachers and the building as a whole. And so you've got some additional details in that memo outlining a strategy that we would like to do for our instructional assistants. We've been struggling to recruit instructional assistants into the district. We've compared ourselves with other surrounding districts and we're competitive with that rate of pay. But when we look at McDonald's or other local businesses that are offering a starting wage at $15 to $20 per hour, we're not competitive. And in our small community, we have to figure out a way we can recruit those highly skilled individuals to serve our district and to serve our students. And for that reason, with the instructional assistants, we're asking that we make a mid-year change to the salary schedule only in movement of their classification and move them from row D over to row F on the schedule column D to column F. That is going to be a cost to the district. The spend on that would be moving from D to F is estimated around $73,500. In addition to that, we have to evaluate where we're at currently with our substitutes. We're running at a fill rate of in the low 80%. But if you take into account, we've added a category over the last couple of years to try and figure out how many times we're having to pull other staff members to push into those classrooms. And so we have a category now in our frontline absence management that's called filled internally. And so it'll illustrate that that's filled, but the reality is we've had to fill it from within. So we've had to pull a teacher from another classroom, an IA from supporting a student, an administrator from their, duties at hand to try and push in and cover that class. And so if we eliminate that, our fill rate is much lower than 83 to 85%. When we look at the rankings of where we're at with our rate of pay for our substitutes compared to surrounding districts, we're towards the bottom of the list, currently at 24th out of 27 districts that we compared ourselves to. We're asking that we increase the rate of pay for our substitutes from $100 a day up to $115 per day. That'll take us up to 13th in ranking. That'll make us competitive with our immediate neighbor, Kearney, and then also more competitive with Platte County and Liberty also. And so we're asking for that shift or increase in rate of pay for our substitutes. In addition to that, when we started looking at our substitutes and where we are short in all areas, we noticed that our nurses are really struggling when they need time out of the building or time off to have a substitute fill in for them in the position of nursing. So we currently utilize not only in-house nursing substitutes, but we utilize an agency that we contract with. Lately, we've been having to get nurse subs from that agency. When we pay for a nurse from the agency, we're paying anywhere up to $28 more per hour for that nurse than we would in-house. And so if we were to raise our nurse substitute rate of pay, we actually would probably save money. And so the cost estimate to increase the nursing rate of pay, we estimated at a 0 increase, but most likely we would save money if we're able to recruit in-house. So for moving the substitutes from $100 per day to $150 per day, that's an estimated cost of $61,500. Now, these costs are for an annual move. We would suggest that we make this effective January 1st when we return from break. So we would be paying these increased costs for half of the year. That would give us an impact of around $67,500 for this school year. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mr. Hedgeforth can answer any questions on the financial side, and Mrs. Harwood can provide her feedback.
So something I'd like to add, to kind of put a little different spin on it. If we looked at increasing our substitutes, when she talked about 80% fill rate, if we deducted the amount of internal, I know one day we were looking at like a 66% fill rate. Well, it's really hard to educate kids when you don't have teachers to do so. So we started really looking at examining our substitute rate of pay. As she said, we were very low. As we increase that, that has a direct correlation then to that instructional assistant pay. We don't want our instructional assistants making less than our substitutes either, and we need more instructional assistants, as you've heard earlier. So they really do go hand in hand. And as we look at that, we really discussed it long and hard internally as a cabinet, trying to decide what's best. We know that the board doesn't love these one-off requests, but again, you're looking at meeting the needs. We know our teachers need an increase in salary too, and we need to look at that here in the near future. But I just wanted to explain kind of how those go hand in hand to the board.
Subs, so we're at 80% fill rates. How does that compare to all of our neighboring districts?
I can tell you that the districts that I've directly communicated with, all districts are struggling, which is why a lot of districts are making mid-year increases in the rate of pay for their substitutes.
So do we know what that data looks like? Do we know what? So here's my fear. That we just do this across the region and all we did was spike inflation and just chase an opportunity when I could have reinvested it into teacher salaries. Okay. So for me, analytically, I want to see the regional impact, what their proposed rates are, if you can obtain it. If not, I completely understand, but I do struggle because we have approved a lot of one-off incremental costs almost every month, it feels like. And we just got done hearing a lot of feedback that we have to start prioritizing money into teacher salaries. It's hard to do that when operationally we're putting money over here.
And I agree. In your packet, I did share 27 school districts and their rate of pay for their substitutes. I can tell you that, you know, it's difficult. Our teachers, we definitely all agree that we need to invest in our teachers and our teacher salaries. The flip side of that is providing, you know, paid time off to our teachers and honoring when they need time away, either for personal reasons, if they're ill, if a family member's ill, whatever it may be. And some of the feedback that we get is a teacher will feel guilty for having to take some personal time off because they know we're struggling to find a substitute to fill that position. And so we're kind of backed in a corner. It's a no-win. We have to do something to try and recruit and retain substitutes to come in and fill those spaces when our, you know, full-time staff members need to take a step away for whatever reason it is. And so we're hearing both sides of it. We want to increase teacher salary, increase that pay, but also we're hearing that I need to be able to have time for myself. I need to be able to take care of these things. I need to not feel guilty if I'm out of the classroom. So I don't have the perfect answer that's going to solve that solution. All we know is we're competing with a lot of people other than other school districts for individuals that will do this type of, you know, I'm going to call it, I guess, sporadic work. And so this is one strategy that we can try and employ.
Yep.
But to Ethan's point.
Ian.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Ian's point, if we look at St. Joseph and Independence and Grandview and Kearney and Lee Summit all paying $115, if their fill rate is 70 to 80%, then there's a good chance that upping this to 115s, all it's done is given money to in the substitute's pocket, increasing inflation, but our fill rate's not going to increase. So we're no better off. And we've taken money away from a pool to pay for teachers or put in a teacher's pay. So from the ask, it's not clear whether this is going to actually benefit us or if it's just going to be more money to the district out where we could have put it in somewhere else. And that's a hard thing to know one way or the other, but without the data, it just looks like there's a real possibility if all districts are struggling, there's a real possibility that we increase the salary and we're still struggling and we haven't really moved the bar. And if we haven't moved the bar, it's not money well spent.
And I don't disagree with that. I completely agree with that. I think that there's a couple of things we can consider here. Substitute pay, we set every year. And so if we make this move and it's not something that's working, we have the ability to put it back to $100 a day or 110 or 105 or whatever we need to do with that. So just because we increase something today for this year doesn't mean that next year we have to retain that same rate of pay. The districts that we are looking at, a lot of the districts that are provided the information to you on, they increased their rates for this year because the fill rates were low in the past, trying to find strategies to recruit substitutes. COVID impacted many things, but it impacted people who typically would substitute. Parents who would generally, work part-time or stay at home with their kids, they didn't want to come back into the schools when COVID was an issue. A lot of retirees would come back and they would continue to substitute as, some additional income. They have not come back and substituted. The number of retirees that we have substituting now is far less than what we had in the past. And so we're open to any other creative ideas to try and recruit additional substitutes. We're out marketing it. We put it and advertise in places we've never done before. Chris Lawrenson, our administrative assistant for human resources, she's at activities and different fairs, and we set up a thing at a football game before. I mean, we've got little flyers and bathroom stalls. I mean, we're trying to find ways that we can, get it out there. Word of mouth typically seems to be the best, but also people are wanting to get paid for the time that they put in, and it has to be worth their while. So it's a strategy that we can try. I can't guarantee that it'll work.
The other point that we didn't mention is this is feedback we've gotten from our administrative assistants who are finding the substitutes. That's feedback that potential substitutes have provided them. So that's why we started is because our substitutes were saying, oh, I can go to North Kansas City and make $135 a day, or I can go to Kearney and make 115. So again, it's feedback from our substitutes. Do we know that we'll make an impact? We don't know. Do I know that our teachers or our principals who, it's not substituting in classrooms all the time? I can speak to that. I've done it myself plenty of times. It's a burden. And so I don't know. I wish I could because you're right. We have so much money to put in so many places. So I respect that point of view a great deal. I wish we knew better. But
some of my thoughts as I've been thinking about this is yes, we're talking about teacher incomes needing to go up. We're talking about them for the same reasons, though. They're saying they can go to other places. We have to remember too, though, that teachers are a hugely important part of our district, but we also have a lot of other people in our district that if they weren't there, the teachers couldn't do their jobs. The subs, the IAs. I mean, I can only imagine. I've been in a couple of classes where my kids have had, and the IAs were invaluable to those teachers helping with those kids. So if we don't have that, I think it's very important too. So I have to try to think of everybody as working together and not opposing. I don't want to think of it as we give it here, well, we can't give it to teachers. I think we give teachers, that's coming. That is something that's very big on our thing, but we also have to look at all of our staff too and how it all impacts each other. Our special ed, it's not we need to do this. It's a requirement that we have to have IAs for these kids. And so that's why people have to fill it. They have to fill, there has to be coverage for that. So do I know if it'll work? No, but we're wanting to do that for our teachers. We're wanting to increase the income. So hopefully they don't leave or they'll come to our district. So I don't see what the huge ask is. It's a lot of money. it's something, but I'm thinking of it as trying to help the whole district. And that just helps our kids is, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
So-
Is the bucket's only so big.
So,
It's not, we can do both right now with what. we
Yeah,
have.
if it's one or the other. It's not a both because the bucket's only so big.
so, I have a thought I want to throw out. We're about to hit the midpoint of our year, right? We just got a financial update, based on some, additional dollars that have come in, some expenses that we've had. We have a better view of kind of where we're sitting at the moment. This is something that if it's not working, we can remove, right? Rather quickly. What I want to propose is that we consider passing this evening, and in January, we ask administration to bring back where we're at on teacher pay, what potential steps that we could do, and have a recommendation on what that might look like to maybe make additional steps towards that, whatever that may look like under a framework that is feasible. And we review it more in depth in January, because this is an important topic, I know, for everyone on this board, is teacher pay and retention.
So I don't remember if it was October or November, but one of those months, I asked the question, can we have kind of a financial workshop, if you will, to look at all of our needs over the next year, so we can paint those together and start really assessing it from a comprehensive perspective instead of one-offs. It's easy to have one-off conversations and say we need this. It becomes much harder to compare that when you forecast your revenue versus true need operational impacts, like, hey, I have to add money to the base so I can retain teachers. Much harder when we do that at a holistic level instead of one-offs. And for me, I want to have that conversation prior to I make any more votes on financial investments.
I've got a question. Kind of looking at it, if we take this estimated cost of $67,000,
But we've got building administrators, district administrators, teachers on their planning periods. If you take the salaries of what those people are making and their jobs that they're not doing while they're in the classroom and put that, I bet you're significantly higher, just a guess, than $67,000. And they're not spending that time in the classroom substituting when they could actually be doing the job that we're hiring them to do, because nobody's doing their job when they're in the classroom substituting. So as a thought, it's not perfect, but we're not paying someone to do their job while they're substituting for the teacher's position either. So if we start looking at reimbursing people for what they're doing, it could be a real wash, if not a gain.
Your argument is an argument of value. I wouldn't.
Wouldn't discount that at all. It's 100% accurate. But when the bucket's only so big and money gets spent, then having then the principal do it adds value to the district is great. But in order to do what we're asking here is just adding or taking more from the bucket. That's where the rub comes. It's not the idea that somebody's we're having a high value individual over here doing work, not doing the work that we've been hired to do. Nobody's arguing that. It's just there's only so much money.
Well,
And we're about out.
we wouldn't bring a mid-year change if we were fully staffed in those areas. But in any given day, we may be short 7 substitutes in one building alone. So you're short 7 teachers in a building in any given day. That is an unfilled position. With IAs, we have not been full this entire year. We still are not fully staffed for instructional assistants. If we were fully staffed, we wouldn't bring this request to the board. We would make this part of the entire package and continue to talk about it like we do annually with all of our staffing and our salary. It's because we're in a situation where we don't have the coverage that we need. And so we've got to find a way to recruit somebody into those positions. They are vacancies that we need filled. And so that's one strategy that we're bringing, because we've tried other things and we've been unsuccessful. So this is just to remind you why we're bringing this mid-year. It's not because we're trying to bring different pieces of the puzzle at different times. It's because we're at a critical time where we've got to do something, and this is one possible solution.
Yeah, it feels, I get what you guys are saying, and it feels like we're able to come up with solutions for everyone except our teachers a lot of times. You know, they're constantly the last ones to get it. And I think we're just tired of talking about it, and we're ready to act on it, beyond ready. You know, I volunteered, and I'm allowed to volunteer, and that was shut down. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, we're at a critical point, when I personally know that you shut down a substitute. So it's hard then to put, I don't know, I know I'm just one, but what else are we shutting down? What other options are we shutting down that we're not exploring? And so, yeah, the substitutes that I know are going to do it out of the goodness of their heart, and because their parents probably, and they're going to do it for $100 or $115, but I don't know that it's going to make a big difference. And before I do anything else, I really want our teacher pay to be a priority right now.
Kim, I'm not saying you can't get me there. I don't disagree with the IAs because there is an immediate need. So here's how my brain works. You know, we have, you know, we're not filling positions as quickly. And well, is that because there's more of us that have taken opportunities to take off, and et cetera. And I want our teachers to feel supported, but I also want them to be able to have the opportunity to weigh in on what's of value to them and what they would want to prioritize versus, do I want additional fill rate support with subs, or do I want $2,000 in my paycheck? And for me, I would much rather us just take the time to hit pause, be really intentional in the month of January before I exhaust any more tax dollars, and saying we exercise that opportunity, and here's the strategy. Because when I go back out, because I'm an advocate of increasing the levy, and everyone who's been a part of these meetings knows that. I think the time has come and we need to go do that. But I also, I want to be a steward and say we've done our due process in ensuring that we've went through these planning considerations. And to me, I feel very reactive right now. And I want to take a pause and say, holistically, let's map this thing out and then prioritize together so everyone can have value and input on it. And you guys might have done that in the background, and that's not what I'm insinuating at all. Kim, I have every faith in you in that regard. But for me, that's what I need to feel comfortable to say, yep, let's go exhaust another $100,000+ on this.
So if I'm hearing you right, rather than hiring anything right now in the middle of the year, any position or adding anything to it, you would like to wait and look at our comprehensive plan that we develop by the end
By
of
next
the
board
year.
meeting.
Because when we typically do our exhaustive study of positions and looking at adding things to the base, our salary and benefits committee goes through that work, and they just started that process. We wouldn't go through that whole process until typically, when are we finished? March. So we would not have that completed by the next board meeting, because that process, those groups meet to talk about their salary and benefits in that discussion. So that's my question. Do we want to do the process and let it run its full course? Are you wanting us to do the process in a month?
So there's clearly a trigger identifying a need, right? That's been communicated.
Mhm.
Things are not the way they used to be. We have changes. We need to react to them, right? So our traditional processes of waiting till end of March to do this piece of it, in my mind, well, it's not the ideal plan, because there's triggers that have been identified. We need to re-engage and have that comprehensive conversation.
So want to throw out, trying to figure out how to find a way forward here. We know that the IA is something that we have to get figured out.
And
What if we parse
I
out?
support that.
What if we parse out and approve the IA this evening, then request either a standalone workshop or a substantial part of our next agenda to dive in deeper on where we're at on salaries for teachers and other critical positions?
So, one thought I have is we do have the ability to, I think we've heard a lot of differing opinions this evening, and I think all the differing opinions all are on the same page as far as what our priorities should be going forward. it's getting those different views and different groups together. One thing we have the ability to do is, possibly put together, not necessarily a workshop, but maybe like a committee that comes back with recommendations of, the stakeholders that are involved and impacted by our decisions. And that's a thought too. It's might be a little bit more in a workshop, but it allows all the differing groups to sit down at the same table, if you will, and put together a list of recommendations going forward. So
The current process is we have our certified.
Is our certified salary committee meets, and then we have a classified salary committee that meets. They bring those recommendations to myself and Ms. Davis. And then we run scenarios about what those would cost. And then together, typically I'm trying to think of the month, Sean, April or May, we usually present to the board together. And that's after our financial workshop in March. And so that is a typical process, but there's some urgency, for this. And so do we want to continue with the committees we have already in place with the certified and classified and just expedite those, our process we already have? Do we want a special committee that brings both certified and classified together? What do you see this looking like?
I leave that up to you guys. For me, all I want to see is that we've taken time to have a broader conversation and the feedback's brought to me, and there's a bit of analytics with it. And what I mean by that is, because we can clearly see the sub rates for other districts, but what we don't compare is their revenue rates versus, debt rates. What's that impact? Well, their revenue is not the same as ours. So if we get into a race of saying, hey, I'm going to pay them now 130, that district can easily say, okay, I'll pay them 145. And we're in the same boat. And I don't want to do that either. So I want to understand all of that in a very critical way, but this is just one piece of it. And there might not be anything else out there the rest of the year that you guys think noteworthy and to pay attention to, but have we stopped and paused and forecasted? Because the beginning of the year, if we would have forecasted and we didn't know, right? We had no idea of knowing our aides would be a priority. Like, hey, we can't fill these. Well, all of a sudden, why can't we fill them and recruit them? Well, we had slow recruitment in the beginning and we just missed the opportunity to make that a priority in our budgeting conversation. I don't know, but I want to, for me, pause, reflect, reanalyze, gain perspective, and then put a strategy in front of us so we're not reacting to spend opportunities. That's all I care about.
Yeah, my piece about, I understand we have, what we typically do on year in, year out. I think my concern is there might be somebody that's outside that bubble that is able to bring some value to it. I might have a different idea, and including them in the conversation is something that I think we should consider. So, either way.
If you guys wanted to do what you were saying, how we want to look at all groups and that kind of stuff, I don't think we can speed up our administrations and our staff's way of doing things, of meeting together, because that's what they do, is they meet together and look at all of the different groups and see what's done more. So I don't think it's fair to ask them to have that all done by next month. I mean, because if they might be able to specify out an IA, but you want to compare it to, do we need an IA more than a teacher, than a bus driver? I mean, you're wanting them to do what they do in May, right? Look at everything. Is that what you want?
So first, I agree, and I is needed. Secondly, I want us to have a broader conversation about any future forecasting we might need outside of our routine operating.
And that's what they do, but they wouldn't be able to get that done for us by next month, is what I'm saying.
I'm not going to presume. I know your guys' work schedule, so you guys tell me what's realistic.
Well, I would agree. I think there's no problem with us, pulling that group together. We've already discussed, making sure that's an all-inclusive group. Making sure we have representation from all, to hear those voices. So that's something we can chat with the group. I agree with school being out Friday and having 2 weeks off and then coming back quickly. I don't know that January would be enough time. We could see how far we can get by the February meeting. I mean, if we want to expedite it, I don't want to speak for our committees. We definitely wanted to do due diligence to it, and I think that's what you all want as well. And to hear the voice of the staff, to hear what their priorities are as well. You know, we started it earlier with our administrative team. We can certainly, begin with that group as well to be more comprehensive, to your point.
That's why I just want to make it realistic for you guys, the people that are actually doing the work. Is it realistic? When can we have that?
Right.
Yeah, ultimately, this recommendation needs to come from
Yes.
you all from administration. So do we pull the IAs out, approve that tonight, then ask for an update at our next meeting and a status update and potential recommendation on what we may be able to do?
For the next meeting?
And even if it's a status update on here's where we're at,
I
here's
think
the
it's
plan.
a better update. I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll get it done really quickly and maybe it'll come together, but
Certainly need to ask the opinion of those people that are. charged.
Correct.
Committees. And so since I don't, in charge of those committees, I'd hate to promise something that
but we
Without
could
talking
certainly
about
give a status update.
And Denise, just as a reminder too, it's a salary and benefits committee. And so we're pulling together right now all of the information on our insurance and the cost of that and what that's going to look like moving forward. So that's just a piece of that. And then some positions we don't know until we know a student comes into the district and we are required to hire an additional IA or provide some services. Those are unknowns.
Right.
And so we can't always predict for every possible scenario.
Yep. And that piece, Kim, I totally get. And I'm not saying you can't get me there on the subs either. For me, I just put a caution pause step forward and make sure we holistically look at it real quick.
Totally understand.
We're gonna have there is an ambulance coming to the high school for students who dislocated their shoulder. And so it's not an emergency, but we will hear sirens and see lights flashing. And so we just wanted to.
Thank you.
prevent that alarm.
Good to know.
Thank you, Mindy.
All right. Do you have a motion?
So Board President, I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the IAs and the cost impact as presented in Kim's memo, excluding any other additional conversations until our administration has further updates and a strategy outlay.
Second.
Giving Karen a moment to get that captured appropriately. With that, any discussion of the amended motion?
Who else remembers Ian saying he was feeling quiet?
Oh, I get chatty. I had a cup of coffee. I'm sorry, guys.
Karen, I apologize. Next time we will go decaf. All right, hearing no further relevant discussion.
Thank you, Kim.
Please vote. Okay, motion passes 7-0. I think what's clear from this board is retaining our teachers and making sure they're paid appropriately is a high priority. Next item on the agenda, 10.5, school safety.
I don't have a huge update here. I mean, I was hoping to introduce to you Officer Mendoza. He needed to leave early. So other than that, our EOP process will begin in January as we start revising those. And we're excited to have the additional SRO to serve our students. And that's all I have for you this evening.
Excellent. If there are no questions on that, we'll move on to 11.1, our fiscal year 22 financial audit from Westbrook and Company. Mr. Hedgecourth or Brad, welcome.
Do you have the PowerPoint? If not, I've got a copy.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, it's PowerPoint.
For those following along at home, we're getting the presentation pulled up here in the room.
Yes. Came from Jennifer. Jennifer. If not, I can do that. Yeah. Let's see if I can get up to the audience. Share the screen. No, it looks like it's doing. On the side, I can control it. Yeah. I thought it was another bunker. Okay. Apologize for that. That's all right there. My name is Brad Steele. I'm with Westbrook and Company. We performed your audit. Your audit is about 50 pages long. I've got a PowerPoint to hit the highlights. If you got any questions or anything I don't cover tonight, feel free to stop me anytime and we can go over that. The first thing I always point out is in the internal auditor's report, page 1, second paragraph down, it states, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. You got to clean audit. What Desi's going to be looking for, your bonding company, anybody looks at your audit, that's the first thing they're going to look at and make sure you have a clean audit. The next shows is your statement of activities. And this has, this report shows the governmental activities down the left-hand side, your expenditures related to those activities, and then in the middle there are the revenues specifically associated with those expenditures. So you can see there transportation and I couldn't see my number there. So the transportation is, even though the school spent 1.7 million, there were 285,000 in reimbursement from the state. So the true cost of the district is 1.4 million. This is your balance sheet on modified cash basis. It's got general fund, special revenue, debt service, and capital projects. Capital projects fund is what it says it is. That's where all your capital projects are being spent out of. Debt service, that's where all your debt payments are coming from. Special revenue is where all your certified staff benefits and salary come from. And then your general fund, everything else. Special revenue fund is zeroed out every year, and that's pretty typical for all schools to do that. So that's why that's zero. This is your fund balance, restricted, assigned, and unassigned. And this just shows your debt service, of course, is restricted. The unspent bond proceeds are restricted. And then the assignment comes from being in the capital projects fund and your food service and food activity. And the remaining is unassigned. These are your revenues and expenses by fund. You can see that the biggest thing is your net change in fund balance. In your operating funds last year was about 1.2 million. So that's good. You had a very good year from a financial standpoint in your operating fund. This is your long-term debt, beginning balance, additions, retirements, ending balance, and then there's 2.5 million. In the next year, this is just your bonds payable to maturity, principal and interest payments, and then of course your certificate of participation as well, principal and interest to maturity. The next three are the graphs we put together. We put these graphs together the last 2 years, and this shows your 5-year history of, in this case, your sources of revenue. Even though your revenues go up and down, the sources of revenue for school districts stay pretty consistent. You see there, over 50% comes from local, and county, and you've got the state and federal. The last couple of years, federal's come up a lot, or come up a few percentage points due to COVID, and so that brought the other percentage down a little bit. This is your same type of graph as through your expenditure, and what this shows is roughly 75% of the operating budget is coming for personnel costs. And that's pretty typical for schools. Schools are in that 75% range. This is probably the most important graph is the reserve ratio. And you can see here, you guys are at 22% reserves, which is good. We get the question a lot where we like to see our schools, and we like to see our schools at 20% or above. There's no crystal ball there, but we just like to see our 20% or above. What that says is that you can cover 20% of your operating costs with the current reserve that you have. And then your average daily attendance. We always put that in there because that's a main revenue driver for school and your average daily attendance over the last few years. We've seen a lot of our schools drop off during COVID, and then hopefully start to come back into place. We give an opinion on your financial statements. We also have to give an opinion on your compliance with Missouri laws and regulations. And that our opinion was fairly stated. That's basically your attendance, your budget, your transportation, those type of things. This talks about your internal control. We don't give an opinion on your internal controls, but we do look at them as a way to plan for our audit. And if we come across anything that's part of that plan, we can bring it up. And in this case, we've had a significant deficiency in your internal controls. We've had that for years. A lot of our entities have that just because of the segregation of duties. There is mitigating controls we put in place, and that's why we brought that from the material weakness down to this, because of those mitigating controls in place. We also have an audit of your federal programs, because you have over 750,000 of federal expenditures. We have to audit federal programs. This is a summary of those results. So you've got the top of your financial statement. There's the internal controls, significant efficiency, your federal awards. There were no major findings in your federal awards, which is good. The food service, as well as tested this year, will require to get 40% coverage on your federal programs, and then some of your major programs have to be tested once every 2 years. And a lot of rules on what we have to test and what we do. And this year we were able to get the coverage in food service. You see the bottom there, it says auditee is qualified as a low risk auditee. That's marked no. That's marked no in every school district we do, and it's marked no in probably 95 to 99% of school districts in the state of Missouri, because you have to be gap basis. One of the requirements to be a low risk auditee is you have to be gap basis. Now, all schools, most all schools are cash or not. There's a segregation of duty issue we've had in the past. We also had one recommendation on the budget, and that had to do with the debt service interest subsidy that came in. this was in Fund 10 instead of Fund 3 on the budget. And so resulted in over budget on debt service or under budget on debt service.
Brad, I do this every year. Can you explain for anyone who might be listening or new to the issue or in clarity what that means? Context.
Segregation of duties. Yeah. Segregation of duties, when you have someone in charge that is in charge of in this case, maintains a general ledger and has the ability to process cash disbursements and perform bank reconciliations, those activities should be separated. A lot of times, in order to be separated, you're going to have additional staff. So there's a cost benefit approach to, do we have that or do we leave it alone? Now, some of the mitigating controls that are in place, for example, there'll be mitigating controls to look over the bank statements to lessen that risk. And there's a lot of some schools will say, well, I don't write a AP check. I do the bank reconciliation, but I don't write a AP check. But could you? Yeah, you could. So the ability to be able to do it is there. If we find anything, no, but you still have the opportunities there to not have perfect segregation of duties. And so if you don't have those, of course we have to report on that.
It's a great point, because inside, we have to cross-train our people, because the way we go in, we get recognition from somebody else who knows how to do a recognition. Because we're trying to cross-train.
Yeah, and that's the sole reason that issue still exists. Is a resource limitation in terms of our administration office. And, our board's been aware of that since I've been on the board. I want to make sure that's wrapped in context, because I don't want someone out there to say, wait a minute, you're doing this. That's why I asked you to elaborate over you.
You bet. You bet. And it's also every year, typically when we come to school district, we'll have comments, and it's, some comments we could come every year and say the same thing. But here it's different in that if there was something that could be done to get this out of there, your administration would have been doing it, because every other recommendation we've had over the years, it's not, oh, it's just an audit, we'll do whatever we need to. It's okay, if something happened and we need to do something better, let us know what it is and we'll make it work. We'll do whatever we have to do to get that comment out of there or make it right. So, and that goes a long way for us. We like to be with people that want things done right, and the administration staff does. Any other questions on anything? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, any additional questions on the audit? If not, thank you, Brad. Move on to 11.2, consider district nominee for the Missouri School Board Association John T. Belcher Scholarship. Oh, sorry. Back to 11.1, the financial audit. I would entertain a motion to accept the audit findings.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Thank you very much. Hearing none, please vote.
Yeah, just looked for the wrong one.
All right, please vote. All right, motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. 11.2, John T. Belcher Scholarship.
You have the nominations in front of you, and the board just needs to decide who they would like to grant that scholarship to.
Yeah, if folks had a chance to review, you want to hold up number one for voting for number one, you believe number one, and number two, if you believe number two. And then we'll entertain a motion and go from there.
I think what we talked about earlier was Karen was just gonna ask.
All in favor of number one and do it by a show of hands. That way it was. And then for number two, the same, and she could count. And it would be.
Then we can do a motion after that, based on that result. Okay.
And so everyone knows names are blacked out. I don't know if anyone wants to explain what we're seeing. Or what.
There is an application for the MSCA Future Builders Belcher Scholarship application. The board has provided anyone that applies with all their names and personal information blacked out. So all they can see is their achievements and their grades, things like that, so they can decide who they would like to receive that scholarship. And we have 2 applicants.
I'll take, I'll go down. And you want all those in favor of one, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Or do you?
One and then
Okay.
same for- I like show a thumbs up, Karen, like.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up for number one. Okay, thumbs up for number one.
Whoa.
Thumbs up for number two.
All right, I would entertain a motion to accept number two as our nominee for the John T. Belcher Scholarship.
I motion that we accept number two as the nominee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda. 11.3, 2023-2024 school calendar.
Well, talking about fast tracking things, this process was fast tracked this year again, and we have the new school calendars proposed to you a month early. Jessica, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, it's just the feedback was really consistent between parents and staff, and I created 2 drafts and sent it to the committee, and they're like, yes, let's put this forward. So they're, typically they might ask me to develop a different draft and make some changes and that extend things, but they were pretty pleased with the options that were presented. And so the calendar that you have before you is very similar to this year, with one exception in that we have a Friday off in April. Because the feedback that we had received was that the stretch between spring break and the end of the school year was a little long. And so for staff, that means that they have 9 days of break at Christmas, and then they come back to their work day, which is all work, no, for them. There are no meetings, it's just a day for them to get in and get ready for second semester. For students, it means that they have a 10-day break at Christmas time instead of 11.
Any questions for Dr. Capsell on the calendar? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the calendar as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda, 11.4 personnel report.
So the personnel report is provided in your board packet. Ask for your approval of the hires for December.
Any questions on the personnel report?
Make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented in our packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mrs. Carlisle will be abstaining from this vote as she has a relative on this list. So with that note, please vote. Motion carries 6-0 and with Mrs. Carlisle abstaining. Thank you all very much. Next item on the agenda is 11.5, surplus property.
Yeah, so on your list, of course, is board policy that any surplus property we have, we get board approval to be able to put that out on an auction site.
The materials that you have in this submission is the wrestling mats that are in the mezzanine of the high school gym. With the ballot language that we approved tonight, part of that project is to remodel that gym area, and that includes knocking out those walls. We need those mats gone to be able to do that demolition project. So even if no matter what, we need to remove those mats, no matter what we do with that space in the future, since we have the new space there. So that surplus property is to put those existing mats in that room out on surplus.
Any questions on this one? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the listing the surplus property. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion carries 7-0. Last but not least, the ever popular 12.1 miscellaneous.
Check my words, everybody's favorite item. Short and sweet tonight. The board candidate filing period is open now from December 6th through the 27th. Karen Kopp will be in the office from 8 to 4 on the 15th and 16th, and from 3 to 5 on the 27th, or by appointment. Since we're out of school, she is available. Also, keep an eye on your email for your board self-evaluation instrument. It should come around January 9th. You'll have 2 weeks to get that finished. Anything else about that, Karen?
No.
Okay, you might want to we need to schedule a separate meeting to discuss your board evaluation.
Very good. On the first one, we did hold a candidate workshop last week. We had several attend, and want to thank Mrs. Carlisle, who came and shared her perspective as a new board member, and some things that she went through, and her learnings from the year. It was a great session, and appreciate everyone who attended that. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, please vote. 7-0, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for a healthy discussion this evening. Good evening.
You need to let Mark know that